This week on The Startup Life.
I talk about 90% in the book. Like, you always say, oh, you got to give it 110%. You got to give it, and if you do that for a long period of time, you're going to burn out quick.
All right, Startup Nation. So let's take flight with Kim Foster Carlson, author of Good Enough: How to Overcome Fear of Failure and Perfectionism to Live Your Best Life. The Startup Life begins now.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Hey Startup Nation, do you enjoy the startup life? Now you can let the world know with gear from the show. Choose from the Label Yourself, Make Your Own Luck, and Making Money t-shirts to tell your story of your path of entrepreneurship. Click the link in the show notes to purchase. All right, Startup Nation, so I hope you're ready to receive some value today. We have a special guest in the building today. We have Kim Foster Carlson, who's an author, and she's going to tell us all about her book. How you doing today, Kim?
I'm doing great. It's nice weather here in California.
Awesome stuff. It's a little cold here in Memphis, so I envy you just a little bit. So are you ready to pour some knowledge into Startup Nation today?
I sure am.
Awesome stuff. So this is Dominic Lawson with the Startup Life podcast, brought to you by the Binge Podcast Network. So Kim, if you would, tell us your story about your amazing career in broadcast journalism.
Well, I started out actually as a sportscaster. That's what I wanted to do. And that was back in the 80s when there weren't that many women doing sports.
Gotcha.
And they would say, I'd come in and be like, and the boss would be like, is that woman doing sports again? And I'm like, okay, I know my stuff, And I had one news director who said to me, you're a woman, people are going to listen to you much closer, so you cannot make a mistake. And I was like, uh-oh. Not at all, so then you sort of get that in your head. Okay, I can't make a mistake. And you start making mistakes, not really ones that anyone would notice, but I would notice. So it sort of started that whole fear of failure and perfectionism thing going. And then I got into news because there were so many more news jobs than sports jobs. You'd have 2 sportscasters, but there'd be 10 reporters. So I started to get into the news side of things. A very, competitive, cutthroat business as well, and it sort of feared that whole, fear of failure and perfectionism, because in journalism you have to be completely accurate, impartial, that whole thing.
Right.
I was a swimmer. I was an athlete. Went to Florida State and swam there, and I think you start that type A personality, and then it's sort of, which is a good thing. And then you get into that, I can't make a mistake, fear of failure. And then you start sort of not trying anything. It's like, I'm not going to try that. I might fail at that. So it's sort of,
right.
And I saw that in my kids. My kids are competitive swimmers, highly successful. And I started seeing the same thing. So I actually wrote the book for them so they could overcome their fear of failure. But I've been in broadcasting for 30 years, covered fires, floods, earthquakes, Super Bowls, and I went to Game 5 of the NBA Finals a couple years ago and covered that for the Warriors, my team.
For sure.
So it's been a great career.
Awesome stuff. Thank you for sharing that. Quick follow-up, if I could, because you talk about, the role of women sports journalists and stuff like that. So when you see Erin Andrews and Leslie Visser and Hannah Storm, where do you think we are in the state of women journalism, and particularly covering sports?
I think it's much, much better. I mean, you turn on ESPN and there's always a female anchor. Sometimes the females are only on the sidelines. Doris Burke, who's my hero, she does NBA play-by-play. She's awesome.
She's amazing.
Yeah. So it's come a long way from when I started, where there weren't any women around. There's still, you you just don't want the token woman because there's a woman there. You want a competent woman doing sports. But, you know, to me, it's a beat. It's sort of like, okay, I have, you know, my beat is sports. I got to know everything there is to know about sports. My beat is education. You know, it's sort of, you're being a journalist, but I think it doesn't matter if male or female. You know, if you know your stuff, you know your stuff.
For sure. For sure. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. So, you know, like I said, you've had an amazing career. You've achieved many accomplishments, including the National Murrow Award for your coverage of the Oikos University shooting. If you would, take us back to that day and explain your thought process as you covered that story. I guess I'm interested in how you cover the story thoroughly, but at the same time, you show respect to the victims and the victims' families.
Oh my gosh, that day was a day I'll never forget because I was on the air by myself doing the noon news, and all of a sudden we got, you know, shots fired, diverted the two reporters to Oakland and started covering that story. And this man had gone into this vocational school and shot 9 people and then took off, and he's on the loose in Oakland.
Wow.
So we were able to get a witness on the phone who was right there as it was happening. And so my job was to keep that guy calm and to get information out of him. So I kept saying, now, what do you see? What did you see when you first got there? What do you see now? Do you see anybody out? You know, I kept trying to keep him, you know, explaining everything and trying to stay calm and in the face of this just horrific thing that was going on. And then when they were able to catch the shooter a couple miles away a few hours later, we entered it, you know, thinking, it was a breaking news story. And it ended up resonating with a lot of the judges because they said that the anchor kept calm under extreme pressure of interviewing, you know, eyewitnesses. And that's what I tried to do. And then I got off the air and I was like, okay, just what happened? And, you know, I had to debrief myself because you're just in the moment.
Absolutely. Staying
in the moment, going, you know, from here to the Oakland PD press conference, back to the live reporters. You know, it was a hard story to do, but we had to do it. And we hopefully by describing the suspect and everything helped, you know, somebody saw him at a grocery store and called 911. So, but that's what the National Murrow judges had said, that I had stayed calm under pressure. So I guess I did at the time. I didn't feel like it at the time, but I guess I did.
Right. Because I was quite fascinated by that, you know, and when other journalists do that as well, because like you said, like to be able to stay in the moment and stay calm under pressure and to kind of have that balancing view, that's, you know, it's quite the balancing act. Not to repeat myself, but, you know, to do that. So I appreciate you sharing that for sure, Kim. I really do.
Well, and that's part of the reason I wrote the book is I stayed in the moment. I didn't think of anything else. You know, I tried to remain, you know, who are my listeners and what were they hearing? And I didn't want to just, you know, freak out. And there's a gunman on the loose, so to speak.
Exactly.
You know, you have to kind of stay calm, stay in the moment. And that's basically how I overcame fear of failure and perfectionism, was to stay in the moment. And then I often talk in the book about my favorite player, Steph Curry, who plays for the Warriors, and he plays with joy. You know, you play with joy. You know, in that moment, I was not in joy because of the seriousness of the story, but
for sure.
In other things in life, you know, you see Steph Curry on the court, and he loves the game. You know, he's not afraid to fail. His coaches said, we saw early on, he would miss 5 3-pointers, and then he would not lose any confidence that he would get the next 5.
Right. And so, you know what, at that point, let's go ahead and dive into the book, and the reason I wanted to ask that question, because when you talk about, you know, covering stories like that and others, you know, a person's process and attention to detail is very important, especially when you're writing a book. And so, you know, the name of your book is good enough: How to Overcome Fear of Failure and Perfectionism to Live Your Best Life. And Startup Nation, you can purchase that book on Kim's website, kimfostercarlson.com. And we have a link in the show notes for easy access for you to access that link and purchase that book. So, you talked about, what inspired you to write the book and things of that nature. Was it a thing where like there was a key moment to like, I have to write this book, or was it something that just kind of slowly built over time?
It all of a sudden just came on like a firestorm. I don't know. All of a sudden I was like, I got to sit down and write. I'd sit in my backyard with my laptop and I'd research some things, and it was really for my daughters, because my daughters were both Division I athletes, swimmers. My oldest daughter went to the World Championships in swimming and won a bronze medal.
Nice.
And I could sort of see that same thing. I could see it again. I was like, oh no, this is coming again for these kids. And I've sort of overcome it. I want to help them. So I basically thought, I'll just give it to everybody for Christmas. Gotcha. It'll be like a fun little book. And I sent it to the publisher. The publisher loved it. They started printing it. And then, they told two friends and so on and so on, so it sort of came there, but it was really, they were the audience, they're millennials, they're starting out in their careers. Everything's, scary. Oh, I don't want to try that. I'm not going to try that. I'm going to fail at that. And I'm like, you got to fail. You got to fail. You got to fail often. When you win, you learn. When you lose, you learn. And sometimes you learn more from when you lose, or when you have a failed business or a failed event happen in your life. That gives you more information to help you succeed in the future.
Got you. Thank you for sharing that. You almost sound like the Alanis Morissette song. When you fail, you learn. When you win, you learn. I appreciate you sharing that for sure. So you shared a little bit about the process of writing a book. If you would, how did you prepare for the book? Did you get an outline, or whatever the case may be? Be as transparent as possible, because we have a lot of people in Startup Nation who want to write books, and so they're not really sure how to start. So if you could share that with us, that would be very helpful.
Oh yeah, I started with chapter titles, and I don't know if you've seen the chapter titles. They're kind of funny, kind of funky.
Right.
And then I sort of like one of them is, if you're not first, you're last,
the Ricky Bobby quote.
Yeah, because my daughter got third at the World Championship. She had never been so happy to get third in her life. That's what she told me, because she, and it's true in the Olympics. If you get the bronze, you win, and if you get fourth, you lose, so to speak. So I tried to have personal stories, quite a few personal stories, and it's the small stuff, the 24-hour cleanse, here comes the judge. So that sort of was a tease. In radio we call it a tease, so to speak.
Gotcha.
And that helped me. Okay, I'm in this chapter, I'm going to talk about this one thing. And my chapters are like 3 or 4 pages. I start with a personal thing, then I sort of go into some research behind it, and sort of get a message at the end of it. So it was very similar to writing a radio story. So you start in with the main topic, but the outline of the chapters really helped me.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. I hope you got that, Startup Nation. For those of you who are thinking about writing that first book, make sure you kind of give that outline, have that outline before you get to writing and stuff like that, for sure. Thank you for sharing that, Kim, for sure. So, in the book, you talk about your mom, who is very super loving and this, that, and the other, but she was also very strict. Tell us a little bit about her.
Oh my gosh. She was a British nanny who came to the United States with a family of 4 boys, a lawyer in Boston. And she was just going to work there for a bit. Then she was on her way to Australia, and she met my dad, who was an Air Force pilot. And the rest is history. But she sort of, very British, raised us very, strict. Children shall be seen and not heard, and that kind of thing.
Right.
And my friends were all, not hooligans, but they were raised a little bit like, woohoo, It was the 70s. And we were always like, God, she's so mean, Now we realize that she was, trying to set us up for success later on. But she, we'd come home with 6 A's and a B plus, and she'd look at the report card and go, why wasn't that B plus an A? And you're like, oh, so she sort of set that perfectionism going too. Okay, if I'm not really good enough for my mom unless I get all A's. And so then sometimes you sort of give up. You're like, okay, I'm not going to try if I can't be perfect, or I'm not going to, it's like starting a business. I'm not going to, I'm going to give up before, because it's not going to be, a $10 million business, but you can start out with a $100,000 business and then move up from there. And I didn't realize that. I thought it sort of got that all or nothing view of life. But she and she raised us very British, so we were always taught formal, things, which I think now I'm grateful for. But back then, as a teenager, oh boy, not too fun.
For sure. Sure. We definitely, as we get older, look back and start to appreciate the things our parents do for us. For sure.
Exactly.
For sure. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you talked about this earlier. You live in the Bay Area, so obviously you're a huge Golden State Warriors fan because you mentioned Steph Curry in the book, and you talk about the confidence and the joy that he has, and you talk in the book about how his college coach talked about that. And I actually watched that NCAA tournament run that he was on, and he was amazing. Like, he was absolutely amazing. That's probably by far the best tournament performance I've seen in all the time I've watched, like, the NCAA tournament, for sure.
Oh yeah, from this little school called Davidson.
Absolutely.
In North Carolina. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the reason I know that, because here in Memphis, we went to the championship game and lost to Kansas. We were kind of hoping Davidson kind of took Kansas out, but that's neither here nor there. But anyway, I want to ask, where do you think that confidence comes from, right? Is it like just the pure joy of playing the game? Is it because his dad, who played in NBA, Del Curry, took him around to NBA, arenas as a kid, so he's not like big, afraid of the big stage? Like, where does that come from, you think?
They always said, if you've seen some of the interviews, it comes from his mom.
Okay.
That his mom, Del's is playing basketball. He's not, around as much, although he does take Steph to a lot of shoot-arounds and stuff before the games. But they said that Sandra, I think that's her name,
Gotcha.
She was strict, very, very strict.
Okay.
That they weren't allowed to watch TV, that they had to do all their homework, that they, and he talks about his mom. She was a Division I think, volleyball player.
Okay.
And then the coach at Davidson talked about that this kid comes in and he has no fear of failure. Like, he has confidence, but not too much, he's not overconfident, but he really plays with joy, stays in the moment, and tries to get the best of his player. Not selfish, which is, a little bit rare in the NBA.
Right.
As we're seeing with the Los Angeles Lakers now. No, I'm just kidding.
Shot fired.
But and he, and he's a good person. He's a very charitable person. He lived in our town before he moved to a gated community. Okay. And he'd go to the grocery store. This is like, this is after they've won an NBA championship. Gotcha. And he's at the grocery store hanging out. He goes to movies, and then there's starts crowds of people following him everywhere now, but he's sort of unassuming, and he's 6'2". There's a great story that was just written recently about him, how he was written off so many times. Mm-hmm. No colleges wanted him. He's too small. He's too tiny. He's erratic. He shoots he tries to way too many threes. The Golden State Warriors did pick him in the first round, right, and it took a while. He was hurt all the time the first couple of years. He had ankle problems. So it's like he overcame fear of failure. He just kept on going, and look at him now. I mean, and I think that's why he respects the game. He plays with joy. He boosts his teammates. I mean, look at Boogie Cousins has come in, and Boogie Cousins was sort of the pariah of the NBA. Nobody wanted to play with him.
Right.
And he's doing great playing with the Warriors. So, and Steve Kerr, the coach, a lot of it that comes from him, and he played with Phil Jackson, the Zen master and all that kind of thing. But it's, you could build a corporation and a mindset off of what the Golden State Warriors are doing.
You absolutely could. And I've actually seen Steph Curry's display of confidence and joy, firsthand. He was actually, when they came to Memphis a few years back, and this was back when Monta Ellis was still on the team. So this has been a while, right? Mm-hmm. And so there was in shoot around, and the ball was going out of bounds, right? And he was trying to catch it, and it's behind the backboard that he was, shooting around it. So he gets it. He's like falling out of bounds. He throws it up, and I swear it switched. And everybody's like, "Oh my goodness! Like, are you serious right now?" Like, "Oh yeah, we see what kind of night we're gonna be in," and we lost by 20. So clearly, I know exactly what you're talking about as far as his confidence. But thank you for sharing it. I appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, we always talk about, when Michael Jordan was playing, you want to be like Mike or play like Mike. We here it's all about Steph. Be like Steph, play like Steph. I don't think he's bought a dinner in probably 5 years here in the Bay Area.
Gotcha, for sure. Thank you for sharing that. So, in your book, you say something that I thought was quite profound. You say that you shouldn't confuse perfection with high standards. Break that down for us a little bit for Startup Nation, if you would. Oh,
yeah. I mean, I talk about 90% in the book. Like, you always say, oh, you got to give it 110%. You got to give it, and if you do that for a long period of time, you're going to burn out quick.
Mm-hmm.
There's a thing in swimming called threshold where you try to go as long as you can at a pace that you can keep. And so that's about 90%. And you can go a lot further on 90%. So it's sort of like, oh, good, that's good enough for the day. But that doesn't mean that you sit on the couch and do nothing and go, oh, that was good enough for the day, I'm out,
Gotcha.
I mean, it doesn't give you the permission to be lazy or to not try your best. But it's sort of keeping you going for the long run, especially when you're, especially if you're starting up a business or even going on book tours or anything like that. You could get so into it, I'm going 110%, but then you're going to burn out.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that, because I thought that quote was fascinating, and I wanted to get some clarification on it for sure. So I appreciate that. So, you often talk as well that perfectionists are also procrastinators. How is that? That seems kind of weird to me.
Oh my gosh. Well, because you're like, I don't know, that sounds like it's a lot to go to the gym today and work out. I think I'll just sit at home. It's sort of, you sort of, it's that all or nothing thinking. Okay.
Gotcha.
So, yeah. So, and if you're like thinking, I don't think I'm going to do this very well, I'm not going to try. So you put it off.
Gotcha.
And I've noticed that I started to do that as well. And you almost have to do, they talk about this. I talk about this in the book, is there's this college that these kids come into, it's Smith College, and it's, Ivy League school, and all the kids were coming in afraid to fail. They've gotten 4.0s, straight A's all through high school. They come into college, they get a B, they go, I'm out, I'm sorry, I'm done. The college isn't for me. And the college admissions counselors like, what's going on here? So they really saw a fear of failure. So they make every college freshman take a failure course, and you have to fail at something.
Right.
And you have to try something you're not good at, and you're going to fail. Like I talk about, I swim. I'm in the water. I am graceful. I am, I look good in the water. I'm fast. I get out of the water. Anything out of the water, running, basketball. I can play a little bit of volleyball. I'm 6'2", but I am just like a fish out of water. But I'm like, no, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try ice skating, and I'm going to fall hard, but I'm going to get up and keep going. So I think you have to get over that procrastination, which can really ruin your life. Is to say, okay, I'm going to stay in the moment. I'm going to try this. And if I fail, I'll learn and I'll move on to something else. And I think you look at Steve Jobs, he had like 4 or 5 versions of the iPhone that were horrible, before he got the one that, changed the world. If he would have given up, we wouldn't have the iPhone, So it's almost like you have to get past that procrastination to know it's going to rear its ugly head, and to not be afraid of it.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. I have a lot of friends who are perfectionists. So when I read your book, I thought of them often, and it got me to thinking, because there's a lot of times where I kind of see them in one of their perfectionist moments, and I myself try to let them off the hook. Right. And so I wonder if, after reading your book, I'm wondering, like, am I helping them, or am I standing in the way of their growth? What do you think?
Well, can you give me an example? Like maybe What?
So like I said, I do a lot of volunteering work in some nonprofits that are here in the city. And so there are times where they're asked for volunteers to do things within the nonprofit. And so I'll see a lot of, I'll volunteer for some stuff. And then there's other people who will volunteer for stuff. And then we still need more volunteers. And then I'll see my friends try to volunteer more to make up for everybody else's thing, right? And so I guess that's kind of what I'm talking about. Like they'll try to, because they want to be seen as always the person who they can go to for help.
Right.
So they'll volunteer for more things. So I guess that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I can see that you have to also have personal accountability, that you're trying your best and you're doing the best that you can each day. I mean, we're so over scheduled and everything these days with the internet 24/7 and how this looks, it's like, I want to be out here. This is an Instagram moment, I want to look good for everybody else out there, where it's almost inside of you. It has to be this altruistic, okay, I'm here, I'm in the moment, I'm going to enjoy where I am, and not be like, okay, I got to get the next thing and the next carrot, I have to overschedule myself to look good, and that's when you're going to burn out. That's that 90% that you're not, and you have to really believe what you're doing is helping you and helping others, and not just that Instagram moment, like, ooh, I'm going to get pictures and I'm going to look good,
Right. And I'm glad you pointed that out, because like I said, I'm like sitting there, like seeing them take on more work. And I was like, you don't have to do that. Like, force them to do it. It's like, no, but I don't want them to see them like they can't count on me. Like, they already know they can count on you because you're already here volunteering. So that's why I wanted to ask you that. So I appreciate that for sure.
Tell them about the 90% rule.
I will. I definitely will. Make sure you catch that, Startup Nation, because some of those people listen to the show as well. And just want to remind you once again, if you want to purchase the book, just want to go ahead and repeat it really quickly. Good Enough: How to Overcome Fear of Failure and Perfectionism to Live Your Best Life. You can get that book on Kim's website, kimfostercarlson.com. And the link is in the show notes for easy access. My last question before we go to break, Kim. Now, you have a Hall of Fame career in journalism, if I may say so myself. 30 years, like you said, many accomplishments, amazing career, right? And so when I think about you and I think about other very accomplished women, they sometimes don't get the accolades like their male counterparts, right? Politics aside, I think about back to 2016 when former President Obama said that Hillary Clinton was, in his opinion, was the most qualified person to run for president. First Lady, Secretary of State, U.S. Senator. And it's quite an accomplished, resume. And then we have women, we think about women like Michelle Obama, who talks about the infamous imposter syndrome, right? And so when we talk about those things and we engage in those conversations, it gets me to being curious, like, how does this happen? Especially when we talk about women, where does that come from? Is it my fault? Is it something else? Like, where does that come from, you think?
It's all your fault. No, I'm just kidding.
Fair enough. I'll take responsibility.
Excuse me. I'm holding a cough here.
No worries.
No, I mean, as you've seen, I hate to bring it up, but the Me Too movement, that lot of...
No, please bring it up. Absolutely.
A lot of this stuff has happened in media, from Charlie Rose to Les Moonves. Traditionally media has been sort of this good old boys network, and where women weren't treated as well, because almost like being an actor and actress, they really want to do this. Men in power can take advantage of that. Harvey Weinstein is an example of that as well.
Absolutely.
So I think the business model is changing in terms of that and in terms of speaking up, but women didn't speak up because that's not what you did. I got a lot of flack for being in sports as a woman, when there weren't many women doing it, and they'd say, "Oh, you're just a sports fan." I'm like, "No, I know my stuff." And
absolutely,
and even a few years ago, I had a news director that said that to me. He goes, "Wow, you're just, you're a sports fan." I go, "No, I'm not. I know, I've been involved in sports journalism for 30 years, you know?
Oh, wait a minute. You mean to tell me like after like, because you said just a few years ago,
Yeah.
by this time you have 20 plus years in the game and people are still saying this?
Yeah.
That's
So it's a very traditional male dominated roles. And I'm sure politics is the same way, you know?
Gotcha.
So, but I think that, you know, the Me Too movement is changing all that, and women are speaking up now in greater numbers. And, you know, it's so funny because my daughters are millennials. My older daughter works for the Raiders. She's one of the only women in she's a social media coordinator for the Raiders.
Okay.
And her experience is so different. She was, you know, she's just part of the team, you know, they're not, and she hasn't had any problems with Me Too, anything, you know, and this is the NFL. But the NFL is making a conscious effort to hire women. They have a women head trainer. So their head strength and conditioning coach is a woman for the Raiders. There's women in management at the NFL. So the NFL is really taking, you know, steps to include it, because half of all football fans are women. So I think the next generation will not see this.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Fair enough. Thank you so much. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. How you like being on the Startup Life so far, Kim?
I love it. You're great. You're asking very good questions.
Thank you so much. All right, Startup Nation. So I hope you're getting great value from Kim's content, but we got to pay a few bills. Once again, my name is Dominic Lawson. This is the Startup Life Podcast, and it's powered by the Binge Podcast Network. Hey business owner, the Startup Life reach is growing. Wouldn't you like your business to grow with it? Reach out to us to advertise on the Startup Life. You can reach us at 901-857-4818, or you can email me at dominic@askalsolutions.com. I mean, don't get me wrong, like this is a great music to have break on, but wouldn't this break sound a lot better with the same music but your business being advertised on it? Need more content from the Startup Life, you say? You can now sign up for the Startup Life All Access Pass on the Binge Podcast Network's Patreon page. There is exclusive content written by yours truly, video content where I share even more of my business philosophies, and whatever crazy content I can think of out of that crazy head of mine. And at only $5 a month, yeah, $5 a month, this is more content for you, Startup Nation, to really get ahead of your competition. So instead of upsizing that meal at your favorite fast food joint, you can now invest in yourself on your path to entrepreneurship. Click the link in the show notes to sign up. All right, Startup Nation, so let's continue. So Kim, let me ask you this. I want to challenge you just a little bit. So when we talk about that, you know, being good enough and saying something is good enough, can that be limiting at times?
It can be. And when I talk about that 90%, there are times where you need to go 110%.
Okay.
But you've saved the energy, so you have the energy to go 110%. You know, say if you have a business and it's just about ready to get launched, you've done the work behind it, you're rested and ready to go, and it's sort of like putting on the gas. Okay, now I got to go. Now I got to give it 110%.
Right.
And you've got the tools, you've got the live in the moment, play with joy, and the other one I have is gratitude. So if you're in the state of gratitude, you're sort of open to everything that comes your way. You know, like you're grateful that you're going to start this business and it's going to be successful. You're grateful that you've got this, you know, media job where you're able to, you know, talk to everyone and talk to the people, talk to the newsmakers, and you know, it's sort of that three-pronged is stay in the moment, play with joy, or be whatever you do, make it joyful. I always say play with joy because my Steph Curry comes back to me.
No, absolutely.
And gratitude really, we haven't really talked much about that, but gratitude can get you out of all kinds of things in terms of getting 110% when you need to be, because you're just grateful that you've opened your storefront and people are coming in and buying your products.
Gotcha. I was actually going to ask about that a little bit later, but since we're already here, let's talk about that, because you do talk about gratitude in your book. And so how can entrepreneurs in Startup Nation, how can gratitude help the entrepreneurs and their business?
Oh, gratitude is basically the gateway to everything that you want in your life. And it starts with, just the daily gratitude journal that I talk about. And it's not, I've got to write this whole diary. You just write down 3 things you're grateful for, and it gets you sort of out of that reptilian brain, which is like, go, go, go. Oh, this is going to fail. I'm not going to do, and gratitude, it's like, I'm thankful, that my shipments came in today for my business. Or I'm thankful that, I woke up and went to the gym. I'm thankful that for my family, my dogs. I mean, some days are really, you're really just dragging. You're like, I'm thankful for this cup of coffee, So, it sort of gets you out of that misery, or overwhelm. Get you out of that overwhelm. And if people see you with joy and they see you're staying in the moment, they see you have gratitude, they're going to be attracted to you. It's sort of that law of attraction, and whatever you put out comes back to you. But I've really noticed that in all areas of my life. If I'm grateful, things are coming my way.
I hear that. Thank you for sharing that. That's powerful stuff. I hope you caught that, Startup Nation, for sure. So let me ask you this, because you talk in the book about failure as well. And when we talk about entrepreneurship, I swear, if it was a dish, like it's an entree of like trial and error with a large side of failure, right? So when Startup Nation reads your book good enough, what would they learn about themselves, you think?
I think though, I sort of have anecdotal evidence of my stories. And one of them, I think that, I don't know if you remember that part, but I have a son that has autism.
Yes.
And it was just such a difficult thing at the beginning, and getting that diagnosis, and then someone telling you, he may never drive a car, he may never live independently. It sort of throws you for a whole loop, and climbing out of that step by step. And now he lives independently, and he is an artist, and he sells his paintings, and he's doing great.
Nice.
But yeah, in the book, I have a lot of anecdotal stories about how, I had to get out of my own head, and how I had to overcome, having a child with special needs and what that means, and how people look at him and how he sees the world and everything like that. But he's doing really well now. But there's a lot of times where I felt like a failure as a parent, failure as a mom. And we tried all kinds of things. Some of them didn't work. Some of them worked, and it's especially with a child like that, who there is hope down the road. You try everything you can, from, oxygenated tanks to weird things you buy on the internet. But I mean, I wasn't going to give up on him, and it's almost the same if you're starting a business, or you have a child, you try everything you can. So it's almost like, I'll try this. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, I'm going to go on. I got information from that. I'm moving on to something else that may work. So it is trial and error, but you can't get discouraged along the way. And by staying in the moment, you don't, you sort of get that out of the way. You're like, this is my job. This is what I got to do. I'm going to, move ahead and try as many things as I can, and something will work.
Gotcha.
And it did. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm actually glad you brought up Connor. I was going to ask about him later, but since we're already here, but because that's a story that resonates with me, because my oldest son has autism as well.
Oh, okay.
I know about some of those difficulties. And so when you talk about, and this is, you just brought joy to my heart, because when you talk about how Connor is doing well, he's an artist and he sells his paintings, that gives me proof of concept that my son, Caden, is going to be just fine. And so because that's one of those things, like you talked about, one of he's going to be able to take care of himself. And that's one of the things that we're dealing with as parents now. But so I appreciate you sharing that. But I wanted to ask kind of a follow-up question, if I would. What do you think Connor has taught you about seeking perfectionism?
Oh, I think he's taught me everything that there is to overcoming perfectionism, because, he was, 8 and he couldn't tie his shoes. And then finally one day he tied his shoes, way later than his sisters, my daughters. And we were overjoyed. So it's like, you meet them where they are and how they're doing. And, I'm thinking in my head, this is so late that he's tying his shoes, or he's so late that he's talking in full sentences. But for him, these were all successes. So it got me to sort of reassess what my value of success was. My value of success is not perfectionism. It's him living his best life to overcome all the obstacles that he's had to go through. And I'm sure you've had this too, where people just look at my son differently sometimes, like his language skills are behind, or, he acts younger than he is. And for a while there, I always thought, oh gosh, what will people think? What will people think? And I talk about it in the book, is these people are not in your arena.
I hear that.
Like Dominic, you're in my arena. Like I could talk to you because you've been through it with me, you've been through it. Sure. But these other people, they don't know, the people at church or the people out at the grocery store, they don't know. And they're just looking at you like, what's wrong with your son? So you have to, that helped me dramatically not really worry what people think. It's like, and it's the same with starting a business. You're going to have the naysayers. Oh, why are you doing that? If these people are not in your arena, which is, family, a few close friends and people that have been through a startup,
right?
You don't need their opinion,
For sure. Thank you for sharing that. Even on a personal level, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. That was hard. That was hard to do, to put him in the book, but I felt it was important because it was part of my
the
journey.
story. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So, earlier, we talked about Steph Curry. You actually mentioned his current head coach, Steve Kerr. But I actually want to ask you about Steve Kerr's very famous teammate from back in the day, which is Michael Jordan. So Skip Bayless, we all know who Skip Bayless is. Mm-hmm. He talks about Michael Jordan, and he has like this complex, which is kind of like, I guess he's coined it the Jordan complex. And basically it's one of those situations where Michael Jordan was so good at what he does that, when he became a GM, he wasn't really good at it, right? Because I think he was saying that maybe I was so good at it, why aren't you getting this? And so when I think about that, and I think about your book, and you talk about your kids or whatever the case may be, I wonder if for those of us who seek perfection and they have kids, do they kind of have this Jordan complex when it comes to their kids? Like they were so successful and they were so great at certain things, and their kids maybe not so much. Like, why aren't you getting this? So I guess, do we do that to our kids as well, for those of us who seek perfection?
Oh yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I think that's what I did that not knowing I was doing that.
Right.
I saw that early on with my kids, because I wanted them to do something else other than swim. I mean, I put them in basketball. I put them I put them in everything. And I was like, do you like this? Do you like this? And they're like, we really like swimming. And I was just like, oh, I really didn't want to go down this road.
Gotcha.
But they were really good at it too. And so I think that helped, and then seeing the parents involved, and, my kids go in the Olympics. And I'm like, okay, you have a better chance of winning the lottery than your kid going to the Olympics. Let me tell you. And especially in swimming, they take 2. I call it the meat of broken dreams, which is the Olympic trials. There'll be, 1,000 swimmers, and they pick 24, on the women's team and 24 on the men's team. Right. So everybody else is going home thinking, well, I was 150th, and that's great. You made it to the Olympic trials, but there's these expectations that they're going to make it. Every kid's going to make it to the Olympics,
Gotcha.
And I think even my daughter, who got 3rd at the World Championships, as the Olympics rolled around, she's like, Mom, there's like 5 girls ahead of me, and I just really feel like I want to concentrate on college and doing the best for my team and not really worry about the Olympics right now. And I'm like, go for it. And she did great in college and she says she has no regrets. For me, I'm like, oh, you know, in the back of my mind, I thought, oh, why couldn't she have made it to the Olympics? But that wasn't her. That's her story. That's her path.
Right.
You know, and whatever your child is, that it has to be their story and their path. And I think we as parents put a lot of pressure on our kids. But it's the same thing. If you can go to the soccer game and stay in the moment and watch your child play with joy and be grateful that they're out there exercising, you've won the battle, you know, and not compare them to other children. I mean, that's hard, but I really tried not to compare my kids to any other kids. Like, look at so-and-so, or, you know, where I saw that a lot in swimming. Well, why do they have a faster time than me? Well, they may have developed sooner. There's all these other reasons why, you know, sort of stay in your own lane. That's what we say in swimming. We say, stay in your own lane.
Right.
And, but you know, how many people go to the NBA? Not that many. How many, you know, everyone that plays basketball isn't going to the NBA. Everyone that plays football is not going to the NFL.
Absolutely.
And I think that we set kids up a lot of times for failure when you think the only road is professional sports, where it's nearly impossible to get there. You know, it's like unbelievably difficult. You know,
absolutely.
But I do think with Steph Curry, he's a regular guy. He's 6'2".
Right.
He says he's 6'3", but he's not. He's 6'2". You know, and he overcame all these things, but he was the son of an NBA player and that whole thing. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with striving to be the best you can be, but you want it to be a happy, joyful process. Like my younger daughter swam as well. Swam at UCLA, just barely made NCAAs, but she feels like she had a great career and she got to go to one of the elite universities in the world, you know.
Absolutely. And
I look at her and she almost had a more joyful time than my older daughter, who was, you know, a lot of pressure on someone coming in that's the fastest, you know, on your team and the fastest going into NCAAs and all the points involved and all that stuff. So I just think you have to put your kid in as many things as they can and see what they gravitate to, not what you want them to do.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. So let me put this in perspective real quick. So you have one daughter who placed third in the world championships, another daughter who swam, had a great career and went to UCLA. And you have a Connor, your son, who is autistic, but he sells arts and stuff like that. Like, that speaks to somebody being one hell of a mom. I just wanted to point that out. Like, you're pretty dope, Kim.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I don't know if my kids would say that, but no, I just tried to find what they love to do and what their path was, because I know their path was different than mine. And it's funny because they would say, you know, something about their grades and, you know, do you want to look at my report card? And I go, you know, it's your grades, it's your report card. It's not mine. So It's up to you. You know, I tried to put it back in their hands. It's up to you, you know.
Gotcha.
And I think they learn that my parents are going to be there, but they're not going to save me. They're going to let me fail, which I did. I would I said, I'll bring up your instrument if you forget it once, but I'm not bringing it up again. And so they realized that they were responsible for things, and, you know, they probably weren't so happy with me, but I guess they're okay with me now.
Gotcha, for sure. It's like we said earlier, the older they get, the more they'll share that appreciation, for sure.
Yes.
Kim, I want to shift gears for a hot second because, you've been in the broadcast journalism game for 30 years now. And so I want to get your take on something. So, we talked a little bit about you winning the National Murrow Award, which is named for Edward R. Murrow, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I want to ask you if Edward R. Murrow was around, and me and my wife, we first learned of Edward R. Murrow from the movie Good Night, Good Luck, right? Mm-hmm. So we're fans of Edward R. Murrow for sure, just to provide that context. But, if Edward R. Murrow was here today, what do you think he would think about the state of journalism today?
Oh my gosh, he would be.
Got you. I was just going to ask, do you think he is under attack, or is the current scrutiny needed to keep journalism objective? So I guess I just want to get your take on that real quick.
Oh my gosh, I think he would be so unbelievably upset with what's going on now, and
I hear that.
And the partisan politics, the partisan news.
Right.
There's so many outlets now. You don't, we as journalists, we don't know who to believe, what to believe. Which is good. It's keeping us on our toes of making sure we get sources. And there was a story the other day that came out on Twitter. Oh, the BuzzFeed story. There was a BuzzFeed story about President Trump, but it wasn't anywhere else.
Gotcha.
And all these media outlets went with it. And then they realized BuzzFeed, may be wrong. Oh, because it was something related to Robert Mueller. And Robert Mueller came out and said, no, this isn't the case. This is inaccurate. Gotcha. So, it's made us better as journalists. So I think Edward R. Murrow would be happy about that, because we've had to really, really scrutinize everything. Right. But you also, as a consumer of news, it's hard. Hard knowing which websites are legitimate.
That's very
if somebody
true.
has, an axe to grind. And now there's a lot of, advocacy journalism out there, which there wasn't back in the day.
Right.
So I think he would be like, what the heck is going on here in the world of news? And I guess I can say as a journalist that you really have to scrutinize everything that you read, and you go to those trusted websites, you go to the New York Times, you go to old established journalism, not this new BuzzFeed or Huffington Post, even though a lot of that stuff is fairly accurate. But it's very difficult, I think, as a consumer of news these days to figure out what's true and what's not true.
For sure. And I'm glad you pointed that out. And the reason I wanted to ask that is because, journalism is not my industry, but I revere it. And I've always have, even as a kid, believe it or not. I was one of those news junkie kids. But it's one of those things where it's like it's concerning because, just like you said, you're not really sure who's credible, who's not, or whatever the case may be. And then everybody has an agenda. But also, it's what concerns me is the wanting to be first and not wanting to be left behind. And so not all the checks and balances or I's are dotted or T's are crossed because you're just so focused on being first as opposed to being right.
Exactly.
And so, that's why I wanted to ask you thank you for indulging me a little bit, if you would, for sure. So Kim, I want to ask you this. All entrepreneurs, I believe, have a superpower. What's yours and why?
Superpower?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I think it's to understand what's going on in someone else's life. Sort of, I don't know if it's empathy or I guess being in someone else's shoes.
Okay.
So to speak. I can, and I don't know if that's developed over time or the experiences that I've had. But I feel that gives me understanding in covering stories and interviewing people, to really feel what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. Because I certainly don't feel like I'm, I have all this energy and I'm this type A person at all. I'm sort of a laid back, let's see how this unfolds here.
Gotcha.
But I do feel like if you're able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, you can widen your perspective. And I think that even may help in business if you can put yourself in the customer's shoes, or you can put yourself in other entrepreneurs' shoes. You really have a wider range of knowledge to choose from.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And Startup Nation, when we talk about, being in the customer's shoes, think back to last week's episode when we talked to Brian Ray about digging deeper in customer discovery. That's connected to what Kim is saying here. So last question, but before I ask, I just want to say once again, thank you for coming on the show. You dropped some amazing value on Startup Nation, and we are super grateful for it. Remember, Startup Nation, if you want to purchase the book, Good Enough, How to Overcome Fear of Failure and Perfectionism to Live Your Best Life, you can go to Kim's website, KimFosterCarlson.com, to purchase that book. And the link to the that website is in the show notes for easy access. So,
and Dominic, it's also on Amazon.com. Too.
Okay, and also on Amazon.com, and that link is also in the show notes, Startup Nation, for easy access for you Amazon Prime people out there in Startup Nation for sure. Thank you for reminding me of that, Kim. So, Kim, there's a person out there in Startup Nation that like they're afraid to start their company. They're afraid to start their business. They probably feel like they're not good enough to do that. So I want you to talk to Startup Nation and tell them why they should start that company, why they should ride with that idea, why they should just go for it.
I think if it's something you have thought about over and over again, and it's not going away, and it's something that's inside you that you feel like you have to get out, you have to do it. That's how I felt about the book. I have no idea how this happened. Even my friends are like, you wrote a book? And I was like, I know, I can't believe it. You started a business? I can't believe it. But it has to sort of be in your heart as well. So if you're sort of like, I don't know, I'm thinking about this, then you're going to have more obstacles down the road. But if you sort of have that vision statement, I'm going to help people by offering them this, that, or the other. And you start sort of in the moment. I'm grateful. I feel joyful when I do this. And you start layering, and then things start coming your way. All of a sudden a manufacturer opens up, or all of a sudden somebody else says they'd like to partner with you because they see your enthusiasm and how excited you are about this project. So I think you almost have to work on yourself first before you work on your business. Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so that's going to wrap up this session of the Startup Life. Did you enjoy coming on the show, Kim?
Oh my gosh, I loved it.
Awesome.
I loved it. You have great questions, and as a journalist for 30 years, I ask a lot of questions. You had some great ones.
Oh, you're boosting my head up there, but I appreciate that for sure. All right, Startup Nation. So here's my final take. Kim Foster Carlson has it absolutely right. Look, in this day and age of instantaneous this and gotta have it that way, that, it really does set a bar that's really high. Sometimes that's unrealistic. So a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we always feel like in order to start something, I have to have this in place. I have to have that in place. And what Kim brings with us on this episode and in her book, they like, look, if you have the skill set and you have that burning desire to do that thing that you want to do, you should go out and do it. You're good enough. And I totally agree with Kim on that. Startup Nation, you're good enough. If you want to let us know what you think about the show, have an idea for a show topic, or like to advertise on our show, please send us a message on the Startup Life Podcast Facebook page. And while you are there, like and follow our page as well. It's a way for us to engage with you, Startup Nation, and really grow our community. The link is here in the show notes. Subscribe to the show, as it can now be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or whatever your favorite platform to get your podcast on. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you find our content valuable, please give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us climb the charts and help more people find our show. Also, don't forget to sign up for the Startup Life All Access Pass to get exclusive content. This is exclusively on the Binge Podcast Network's Patreon page. And hey, if you have an idea, be about that life. The Startup Life.